I wasn't talking about
I'm
that.
just frustrated. I can't figure out how to make anything happen to change
I was
anything
just
in my
thinking
life
that maybe it
voluntarily
would make more
for me.
sense
Mm.
to
Not do something I
if
want.
he sent a bunch of listings that are like $8,000 per acre for like 10 acres,
Of course, it would make more sense to spend the least amount of money possible to
and
change.
yet, you know, because I think about the way that you like to play in the woods and all of that, and I don't think that living that close to the neighbors in a very developed county is necessarily the best place to go if you want to have any freedom.
All right.
You want to
When
get
when
away.
we when we rented the place uh, in
Um,
Bon Air,
yeah.
and we did the walkthrough with Steve when I was attempting to model Ned Flanders. I'm going to purchase this, you know, uh, shovel. I'm so happy to be in this store. Gee Willikers. I was not trying to say the perfect rude thing to ruin everything when I said some joke about like, uh, you know, I don't remember at all, but like, probably something to do with ugliness, like serial killing and the trash can and, you know, whoever Oscar the Grouch, like, oh wow, real Oscar the Grouch trash can. I remember I was remarking on it happily, and you got upset because of some, perturbation. My breath is bad, and I came out here to be by myself. Anyway, when I try and act happy about something, that is not my normal. That is not my comfort zone. That is not something that I can say honestly I'm okay with because I'm not okay with spending any of my resources. I'm not okay with being alive and allowing time to continue moving forward. Because for me, the things that I wanted to do in my life were participatory things where it's like, hey, civilization, I have some good reasons why you should stop doing what you're doing and change. And there's lots of people who feel that way. There's lots of people in academia, there's lots of people in your crunchy communities and all this other stuff who are like, the world needs to shift course or something. And that's a big part of how you've lived your life is to say, well, I know I can't do anything about what's happening around me, but I can be an example for others. That's what Sharon was saying. This woman who's got stage 4 lung cancer, and she's, she's the same age as my mother, so she's 70, uh, uh, 8. She'll be 80 in 2025 or 2027, right? Okay, 47, 27, 80 years old. So uh, it's normal, it's predictable. It's like you don't need to even be there to like pay attention to say, oh yeah, somebody who's at this stage of their life and isn't Elon Musk trying to play, you know, uh, uh, toy company CEO Adolf Hitler, and be like, I'm going to change the world, but I'm not going to murder a bunch of people. I'm going to make them buy a
That
bunch
joke
more
at
stuff.
airport got me.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, like I was saying, in the course of my existence, as somebody who was, dumb enough to not understand that my position in society when I was little did not mean that I would grow up to be an astronaut or, in my case, a marine biologist was the thing I had to say. Uh, we had all the highlights for children and the zoo books and the Ranger Ricks and I had a bunch of old like golden field guides from my grandmother's house, and I can remember semi-interesting copies of books like titled like Vertebrate Life or something. Like, I don't know if they were intended to be uh, high school or college level textbooks or what. Um, but we had various things. It was like, oh, this is what's out here in this, the universe that I existence. So this is a rational ambition for me to espouse to, what do you want to be when you grow up, little boy? Well, it says I can do this. There's a bunch of these cartoon, uh, Magic School Bus, Pratt Brothers, uh, Chuck Norris, Captain Planet, little drawings of little kids, going to school and doing this. And, you know, let's raise the children of tomorrow to solve the problems of today. What a great idea. Um, what's the problem? The ocean smells funny, like something is wrong, and all the fish are dying. Well, um, in order to do something about that, you would have to profoundly change the way that living organisms are turned into food on your entire planet. That's not so much something somebody could do by renting a wetsuit and going swimming and writing down a bunch of cute little homework assignment papers. Like, I solved the mystery of who ate this girl, uh, on this vacation beach. It was the Jews. Yeah, yeah, they did it. Um, I don't know if you can tell that was a joke, but it was a joke. I don't blame the Jews for everything. I don't know if they're really that responsible for themselves in general. They seem to be pretty confident as people. Somebody else is looking out for them, and I think that does affect your decision making process and how you convey yourself through life. Um, Not everybody feels that way, but historically, everybody has had extended to them the tribal, um, cultural, you know, upbringing that says your community will keep you going. You can rely on the kindness of strangers, um, in a vast sense where you don't really meet them. Uh, Now that publishing is something that is so incredibly like water or air that it is available basically to anything that can poke things, you know. Um, uh, Various species of bird could accidentally put a video on YouTube, or you could put a trail camera out somewhere that was a little, like, film yourself and then eat something in this bait bucket, and then the bait bucket will refill itself. You could probably train animals to, you know, uh, engage with an audience for their, the voyeuristic pleasure of something else. Um, so I remember my previous generation's experience of arriving at middle age and, sort of like going over the hill of decades of life, stages, not of Calvary or a career summit or anything like that. Most people don't really make it that high up. Uh, in the American sort of slang or vernacular that I grew up on, if you were going through the mountains, the hills, and your car kind of went up a hill and down a hill and up a hill, uh, to the point that your stomach kind of dropped. That was called a thank you man. I think I mentioned that before. Uh, I really still want to look that up on a credible, etymology-esque kind of website. And, there's Urban Dictionary, and then there's a bunch of other stuff that's a little bit more clinical. Um, yeah, when I was in the car thinking about speaking to other living beings, which is always a mistake. Um, Go away.
Where's the yellow car?
The yellow coffee.
Yeah, the coffee, that's
We
the
drank it all.
4 packs.
Yes, I think so. Um, if you can't get the Vitamix out and put it on the counter to grind the
Right, I
beans,
just wondered if you have any.
I don't think we do. We had a discussion about that recently. The last time I was at Costco, I think you said don't get coffee. Anyway, um, yeah, I don't think that it's pointless acting and trying to like like a clutch or something is trying to kind of have its gears mesh together and not slip. I don't think she says spinning his wheels for me. I'm not. I have a fairly um, intuitively, verified by my experiential knowledge grasp of the idea that what I'd like to do in my life is not something that I am able to actually do in a participatory sense with other people. Um, there are a lot of people doing stuff like that. There are a lot of people who are way smarter than me, way more accomplished, way more put together, um, and discursively useful, who are publishing huge amounts of pedagogical, uh, you know, expiation and all of those other kinds of things, talking about how they left their professional life because it was pointless to try and continue in something about as high up as a person can aspire to, whether that's academia or government or law. Uh, they had someone on NPR with Guy Risdall and the CEO of, or somebody from Sweet Green, who was talking about doing a rollout for products and expanding. And, someone called in from Rockville and she said her background was like Irish and maybe Mexican or Hispanic. I don't remember anything. Um, you can only paraphrase when you don't have the authority to be authoritative, like an author. I can't write things down and have anyone take my word for it, so I'm not an author. I can't write things down, therefore, I'm not literate. Therefore, my understanding of anything is just approximate. And if my understanding of anything is approximate, then that leads back into my spoken language. So my spoken language isn't what I'm saying right now. My spoken language is whatever my brain is doing when it thinks it's trying to convey something into intelligible speech. Uh, so, sugar beach, Woolworths. I still like that. That was funny. Um, but there's no you know there's nothing under the trilemma. Um, there's what we can perceive with our senses, and that can change. Any group of people, numbering in the hundreds of millions or whatever, could put on some new fancy underpants and go outside with some new fancy pea shooters and steamroll the rest of the population of this planet very easily right now. In the 1930s and 40s and 20s and teens, it was very obvious that there was a lot of stuff that could have been put together and built. People hadn't figured out how to do previously, as far as we know. They could fuck up a bunch of people's day, and it did. It didn't really change things very profoundly. So it wasn't that big a deal. It could have been a lot worse. Um, people have written extensively in genre fiction, like historical fiction or fantasy or science fiction. I liked Philip K. Dick. I liked his writing. I think most people who try to convey their inner turmoil in a coherent way, whether they're teaching, you know, a foreign language at a community college, or they're, uh, helping people with like business writing. Um, Everybody basically has the same stuff going on in their brains as any other organism. Uh, Most things are aware enough of their own mortality that they seemingly seem to actively try to avoid it. And uh, worms, for example, um, they have two directions that they can kind of perceive their own existence moving, um, and they have degrees of freedom. Um, if I was trying to complain about what seems absurd to me, um, in the modern world, is the absolute lack of, or more modern world certainly, going back to like the printing press, um, is this conflation of secrecy with power. Um, the Rumsfeldian kind of known unknowns and known knowns and unknown unknowns. Just because people don't put something out there doesn't mean it's a secret. Uh, in the sense, sort of like, well, Chad versus, Virgin or whatever. Somebody with a bunch of kids doesn't have to think about their life that way, and doesn't. And that's the perception children have of the adults around them who had kids, is that, well, they must have had sex at some point. And if you're measuring things that happened in the past as markers of your own proficiency or competence or current standing, it's like, well, my ancestors murdered trillions of people and living organisms and rendered several, apex species extinct or whatever. It's like, good for you. Um, that doesn't necessarily reflect how your day is going to go today. Um, and everyone's already awake, so I should leave. But pain is the same way. If I'm racked with incredible aches and pains or soreness, or, I can't, wherever, um, is, I don't like this thing that sticks out. All right, yes, dear. I'll be right there.